I never thought that at 65 years old, I'd find myself staring at my only son's wedding invitation, with my name scratched out in thick, angry, black ink. For months now, Thomas had been punishing me because I wouldn't sell my house to fund his extravagant wedding to Vanessa. But what he didn't know was that on the very morning he was set to marry her, I would receive a phone call, one that would change both our lives in ways we never saw coming, a call that would uncover the painful truth he'd kept buried from everyone. The invitation had arrived 3 months earlier, a beautiful cream-colored card with gold embossing, announcing the wedding of Thomas and Vanessa at the elegant Oaked Estate in spring. I had proudly placed it on my refrigerator, running my fingers over the fancy lettering each morning while I made tea. Now, it sat on the kitchen table, ruined. My name had been violently scratched out, with a note in Thomas's handwriting. Since you've chosen not to support our future, we've decided you shouldn't be part of its beginning. Memories of 30 years surrounded me in my small bungalow on Maple Street. Yellow curtains James had hung still framed the kitchen window, faded now by sunlight. Outside that window bloomed the garden James had once started, now full of vibrant alias that stood in painful contrast to the weight in my heart. I'd been tending that garden alone ever since James passed from a heart attack 12 years ago. Thomas had been our miracle baby, born after years of fertility treatments and heartbreak. James and I had saved for a long time to buy this house, wanting to raise our child in a safe, loving home. I remembered when Thomas first learned to walk in the living room, tiny hands gripping the coffee table James had built by hand. Our kitchen had once echoed with laughter on pancake Saturdays, flour on our faces as James taught Thomas how to flip them just right. The backyard still held faint chalk drawings from Thomas's teenage years, his early architectural sketches etched into the patio James had once encouraged him to use as his canvas. After James died, Thomas was just 24. I worked long shifts at Mercy Hospital to ensure he could finish his master's degree in architecture without any debt. Those years were a blur of exhaustion, late nights, early mornings, but seeing him graduate top of his class made every bit of it worth it. A photo of his first project, a small library, still hung in my hallway. In it, we're both smiling, proud, and full of hope. I often wonder when that grateful, kind young man changed into someone who could treat his own mother so coldly. The shift had been slow. As Thomas's firm gained success, he mingled with wealthier people. His suits got more tailored, his tastes more luxurious, and his visits home became rare. Then, 3 years ago, at 36, he met Vanessa at a charity gala. She came from old money, her family name attached to buildings all over the city. At 32, she was already a partner at a luxury-focused marketing firm. She had that polished look that instantly made me feel self-conscious about my simple wardrobe and worn hands shaped by a life of hard work. During their first visit after the engagement, Thomas had called me mother, a term that instantly made me tense. Sitting in my modest living room, Vanessa flashed her enormous diamond ring while extending her hand toward me. "It's lovely," I told them, more about their engagement than the flashy ring. "I'm happy for you both." But a flicker of disappointment crossed Vanessa's face, as though she'd hoped I'd gush more about the jewelry. That moment should have been my first red flag. Over the months, things remained polite but distant. I attended their elegant engagement parties, always feeling out of place among her designer-clad friends with their rehearsed laughter. Thomas was different in those settings, more concerned with impressing Vanessa's parents and their social circle than connecting with me. Then came the dinner at Lowe, a place so expensive I had to dip into my savings just to join them. After ordering champagne, they hit me with the news. "We've booked Oakta State for the ceremony," Vanessa announced, proudly showing me pictures of grand gardens and a huge ballroom. "Daddy pulled some strings. It's where my parents celebrated their 30th anniversary." I smiled and said, "How wonderful," even though I felt uneasy inside. Then came the real reason for dinner. With the deposit for the venue, the honeymoon in Bali, and the down payment on our riverside penthouse, Thomas began. Vanessa quickly jumped in, taking my hand with her flawless nails. "We need your help to make this perfect. Your house must be worth at least $450,000. If you sold it, you could live comfortably at Sunny Pines Senior Living and help us start our marriage on the right foot." I was stunned. They'd already looked up my home's worth, picked out a retirement place, without even asking me. I finally pulled my hand away and said, "I'm not selling my home. This is where James and I built our life. It's where Thomas grew up. My neighbors are like family." Thomas's face changed, cold, distant. "This is why I didn't want to ask," he said to Vanessa, like I wasn't even there. "She's always been stubborn about the house, even though it's clearly too much for her alone." "I managed just fine," I said sharply. I thought about my garden, the repairs I'd learned to do myself. "And I'm not ready for a retirement home. It's a community," Vanessa corrected, smiling without warmth. "With people your age, you'd be much happier than rattling around that outdated bungalow by yourself." What followed was a painful argument I still struggle to think about. Thomas accused me of being selfish, clinging to the past instead of supporting his future. Vanessa hinted that my refusal meant I didn't really care about Thomas's happiness or social standing. "Either you help us start our life," Thomas said finally, "or don't expect to be part of it. Your choice." They walked out and left me with the massive dinner bill. For weeks, I tried to reach Thomas, calls, texts, even visiting his office, but I was always turned away. Then the altered wedding invitation arrived 3 weeks ago, confirming what I feared. I was no longer welcome. That evening, as the sunset painted the sky, I sat quietly on my porch swing and made a decision. Despite it all, I would go to the wedding, not to cause a scene, just to quietly witness my only son's big day from a distance. Mrs. Peterson from next door waved at me with a kind smile as she walked her dog, reminding me of the warmth of my real community. The thought of leaving this neighborhood just to fund Thomas and Vanessa's lifestyle broke my heart all over again. But nothing could have prepared me for the call I'd get the morning of the wedding, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew about Thomas and the woman he was about to marry. I gently unfolded the baby blankets I could never bring myself to give away after Thomas had outgrown them. At the very bottom of the chest was what I had come looking for, a small leather journal, its spine worn with time. James had begun writing in it the very day we discovered I was expecting Thomas. He had filled its pages with his reflections on becoming a father, along with his dreams for our son's life. After James passed away, I had placed the journal into the cedar chest. It had felt too painful to read back then, yet far too meaningful to throw away. Cradling the journal, I carried it to the sunroom James had built for me as a surprise for my 50th birthday. I settled into the wicker chair where the afternoon sunlight streamed in just right, creating the perfect corner to read. My hands trembled as I opened the first page, and instantly, tears blurred my vision as I saw James's handwriting again. April 15th, 1983. "We're having a baby." He wrote that it didn't feel real after so many disappointments, but the doctor had assured us things looked good at 12 weeks. He described how pale I had been at the appointment, clutching his hand as if I might float away if I let go. He confessed he was both scared and overjoyed, wondering what kind of father he'd be, wanting to be different from his own cold and distant dad. He wanted our child to feel safe in our love and to know that who they were would always be enough. Page by page, I followed James's journey from anxious father-to-be to a loving, devoted dad. His pride in Thomas shone through every entry. December 8th, 1983. Thomas James Sullivan was born at 3:42 this morning. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of absolute perfection. I held him close and promised him the world. Another entry read, June 30th, 1987. Tommy built the tallest tower with his blocks today. He was frustrated when it kept collapsing, but he didn't stop. He tried again and again until he figured it out. Eleanor says I'm reading too much into a toddler's play, but there's something in how he sees things. It's special. And again, September 5th, 1991, first day of 2nd grade. He was nervous, though he tried to hide it. So much like me at that age. Sensitive, but determined not to show it. I want him to know it's okay to feel things deeply, that being vulnerable isn't weak. The entries carried on, capturing both the milestones and the struggles of Thomas's childhood and teenage years, always showing James's steady, supportive love. The last few entries came from the months before James passed, when he knew his time was short. November 16th, 2011. Tommy graduated with honors today. His architectural models were the star of the exhibit. I was so weak, I almost couldn't go, but I'm glad I did. The pride on Eleanor's face. I'll hold on to that when my time comes. She's given so much for him, especially these past 2 years of my illness. I worry about both of them after I'm gone. Tommy is so driven to succeed. He sometimes overlooks what truly matters. I hope one day he'll realize that his mother's love and support are more valuable than any title or award. And finally, December 3rd, 2011. I asked Tommy to take care of Eleanor after I'm gone. He promised he would, with tears in his eyes. He is a good man, deep down. But his ambition, it worries me. It might lead him to chase approval from the wrong people. I've tried to teach him that true wealth isn't in money, but in love, in community, in living with integrity. I can only hope he remembers that. When I finally closed the journal, twilight had already fallen, and the tears had dried on my cheeks. James had seen it all, Thomas's tenderness, his brilliance, his hunger to prove himself. He'd even sensed the beginnings of what had grown into this painful distance. Unlike me, James had the clarity to recognize what I couldn't admit, that Thomas's need for validation had long been a part of him. The next day, I visited Beatrice, my oldest and dearest friend from nursing school. At 70, she had a frank way of speaking that came from a lifetime spent in emergency rooms. And her wisdom had become a compass for me since James passed. Her cozy apartment overflowed with trinkets from her global travels. She had chosen a path of service over marriage, spending much of her life with Doctors Without Borders. The scent of warm chai drifted through the kitchen as she listened while I explained my plan to quietly attend Thomas's wedding. "Are you sure, Ellie?" she asked gently, concern written all over her faded blue eyes. Thomas and that woman could very well cause a scene. "I have to be there," I replied, wrapping my hands around the mug. "Not to cause any trouble, just to be there. He's still my son, no matter what he thinks right now." I can't not witness his wedding day." Beatrice looked at me for a long moment before finally letting out a sigh. "You've always had more grace than good sense," she muttered, though not unkindly. "If you're really going, I'm driving you. You shouldn't have to face this alone." Her kindness broke something open in me again, and I blinked back fresh tears. "Thank you. That means the world." "Well then," she said, shifting into her no-nonsense tone. "What are you wearing? You need to look dignified, but nothing too loud. No one needs to see 'estranged mother of the groom' written all over you." We spent the whole afternoon rummaging through our closets, mixing and matching, until we agreed on a dove-gray dress woven with a subtle silver thread. It was simple, but elegant. Classy, not flashy. Beatrice added the finishing touch, a vintage pearl necklace that once belonged to her aunt. As I stood in front of the full-length mirror, she nodded with approval. "There," she said. "You look like exactly what you are, a woman with grace and heart, who deserves far more than she's been given." That night, the eve of the wedding, I lay in bed quietly, wondering what the morning would bring. I barely slept that night. A spring storm rolled in after midnight, thunder shaking the windows like it mirrored the chaos in my heart. By dawn, the rain had passed, leaving behind a world that smelled fresh and looked like it had been scrubbed clean. I got up early and watched the sunrise from the garden bench. James and I had shared so many morning coffees there. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," I whispered, as though he could hear me. But the thought of not being there hurt too much, even if Thomas never found out I had come. I dressed with care, put on a little makeup to hide the bags under my eyes, and fastened Beatrice's pearl necklace around my neck. Right at 8:30, I heard her car pull into the driveway. The wedding wasn't until 11, but the Oak Ridge estate was across the city, and we planned to get there early enough to slip in quietly at the back. Before leaving, I took one last look around my home. On the entry table was a small, wrapped gift for Thomas and Vanessa. I didn't expect to give it to them, but it felt right to bring it. Inside was an antique silver compass that had once belonged to James's grandfather, a symbol of always finding your way. I'd tucked in a card that read, "May you always find your way home. With love, Mom." Just as I touched the doorknob, the phone rang. I hesitated. Beatrice was already outside waiting. Still, the phone kept ringing, and something deep down told me I needed to answer it. "Hello," I said, expecting maybe a telemarketer or a wrong number. The voice on the other end was a woman's, shaky and unfamiliar. "Is this Eleanor Sullivan, Thomas Sullivan's mother?" "Yes," I answered carefully. "Who's this?" "My name is Rebecca Martin. We've never met," she said, and her voice cracked like she was about to cry. "But I think there's something you need to know about your son's wedding." About Vanessa. I didn't know who else to call. I looked out the window. Beatrice was checking her watch. Everything suddenly felt heavier, messier than it had a moment ago. "I'm listening," I said quietly, sinking down into the chair beside the phone. "I used to live with Vanessa," Rebecca began. "We were roommates for 2 years, before she met Thomas. I thought we were close, until I realized who she really was." I gestured to Beatrice through the window, signaling that we'd be delayed. She nodded and waited patiently in the car. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. "I need to ask you something first," Rebecca said. "Did Thomas or Vanessa ask you to sell your house to help pay for the wedding?" The question hit like a punch. How could she know? "Yes," I said softly. "They did." Rebecca gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "That's her pattern. That's why I called. You're not the first. Vanessa's done this before." I gripped the phone tighter. Done what, exactly? She's been engaged 3 times in the last 7 years, Rebecca said flatly. Each time, she targeted men with good careers, but not much family money, families that owned homes or had savings. Then, she created pressure for them to sell property or take out loans for extravagant weddings. My thoughts were spinning. Are you saying she's some kind of con artist? I'm saying she plans it out, Rebecca said. The first time, her fiancé's parents sold their vacation home to pay for a fancy wedding. 2 weeks before the ceremony, the engagement ended. Deposits were already paid, and the property was gone. And the second time? I barely managed to get the words out. Same thing, Rebecca answered. His mother got a reverse mortgage on her house for the wedding. Vanessa left just before the big day, but not before she had access to shared bank accounts. She walked away with money and gifts. Both families were left heartbroken and broke. My heart was racing. If this is true, why hasn't anyone gone to the police? Pride, shame, and legally, it's tricky. Technically, nothing was stolen. The money was given voluntarily, and she always manages to make herself look like the victim. I thought about how Thomas had defended Vanessa every time I voiced concern, how he'd pulled away from his old friends, how everything had started to revolve around her and her social circle. How do you know all this? I asked, doubt creeping into my voice, even though the story made a disturbing kind of sense. Because I helped her once, Rebecca said, clearly ashamed, with the second fiancé, Daniel. She made up a story about him having an affair, and I helped her tell it. I believed her then. Later, I found texts that showed she planned the whole thing, even picking out his mother's house as her target. So why are you telling me this now? Why today? Rebecca's voice broke. Last night, she called me drunk. She laughed about how she turned Thomas against you, said she made him believe you were selfish. Then she called you. Rebecca hesitated. Another sentimental old bat who'll probably die alone in a nursing home. Those cruel words knocked the air right out of me. I shut my eyes, and suddenly, everything clicked. Vanessa's immediate obsession with my house, her rehearsed concern about my situation, and the way she nudged Thomas toward chasing wealth and appearances. I should have come forward earlier, Rebecca went on, but she's got this way of scaring people. Cross her, and she retaliates hard. She told me how, after confronting Vanessa about Daniel, she'd been smeared with rumors that got her fired. She had to pack up her life and move to a different city. Then why take the risk to call me now? I asked. Because I can't live with myself if I let it happen again. Last night's call pushed me over the edge. The way she talked about you and Thomas. She hesitated. There's more, Mrs. Sullivan. It's about some money problems Thomas doesn't know about. I noticed Beatrice had stepped out of her car and was coming toward the door, clearly worried. I motioned for her to come in, even though my head was spinning. What financial problems? I asked. Vanessa was fired 3 months ago, Rebecca revealed. She's been pretending to go to work. They let her go for faking client billings. She's drowning in debt, credit cards, shopping habits, even gambling. She needs Thomas's income. And your home equity? That would solve a lot. The doorbell rang as Beatrice let herself in with her key, finding me standing pale, clutching the phone. Ellie, what's going on? She whispered after seeing my face. Are you still there, Mrs. Sullivan? Rebecca asked gently. Yes, I replied, barely managing the word. Do you have proof? Thomas won't believe me unless I show him something. Even as I said it, I wondered if what he felt for Vanessa was real love, or something she'd manufactured. I do, she said. Screenshots of texts, copies of her past wedding contracts, photos of the homes her ex's parents sold, and I recorded our call last night. After what she did with Daniel, I started recording things for my safety. I glanced at the clock. It was already 9:45 a.m. The ceremony was at 11. Can you send those to me right now? Already done. I emailed everything to the address in your nursing school alumni listing. I hope it's still good. It is, I confirmed, then finally asked the question I dreaded most. Why, Thomas? Why go after my son? Rebecca let out a long, regretful sigh. Vanessa's methodical. She finds men who look successful, but aren't super wealthy. Guys with close ties to their parents, especially if the family owns property outright. Sometimes, men who have a strained relationship with one parent. She uses that too. Every word she said described Thomas perfectly. Since James passed, he'd thrown himself into work. He'd focused on climbing the professional ladder, let his friendships fade, and though we stayed connected, there was always a small space between us. His guilt about missing his father's final months, his discomfort with my simple lifestyle as he leaned into one of privilege. James died 12 years ago, I murmured. It was really hard on him. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Sullivan. I truly am, Rebecca said, her voice full of guilt. I should have come forward earlier. You're speaking now, I told her, surprised by the calm in my voice. That's what matters. After we agreed to stay in touch, I hung up and turned to Beatrice, who looked stunned. I told her everything in quick, clear words. My God, she breathed when I finished. What are you going to do? I checked the time, nearly 10 a.m. First, check my email, I said. Then, figure out what comes next. My old desktop took ages to wake up. When I finally opened my inbox, Rebecca's email was waiting with a stack of attachments. Beatrice and I leaned in, scanning through text messages that spelled out Vanessa's patterns, financial documents, and pictures of homes sold under similar pretenses. But the worst part, the audio recording, Vanessa's voice, slurred but unmistakable, laughing as she talked about how easily she'd manipulated Thomas, how she planned to enjoy the money from selling my house, the coldness in her tone when she called my son easy to handle and conveniently distant from Mommy, made me sick. We've got to get this to Thomas, Beatrice urged, before it's too late. I nodded and printed everything out quickly. He won't answer my calls. He's blocked me. Beatrice thought for a second. What about his best man, Andrew? He's the one who went to college with him, right? Andy, I corrected, a flicker of hope igniting. They've been friends since freshman year. Thomas hasn't said much about him lately, but Vanessa wouldn't have been able to cut him off from everyone. Not someone in the wedding, she finished. Do you have his number? I did. Somewhere. After a panicked search through my address book, I dialed with shaking hands, praying the number hadn't changed. It went to voicemail. I left a short, urgent message. With no more time to spare and no better option, I made up my mind. We're going to the wedding. I'm not going there as a guest, I said with conviction, gathering the printed documents into a folder. I'm going to stop this. Beatrice looked doubtful. You said there's security. How will we get close to him? She asked. We'll figure something out, I replied, my motherly instinct overriding every obstacle. There was no way I'd let that woman ruin my son's life. As we rushed to the car, the weight of what we were about to do fully sank in. I might humiliate Thomas on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. And even with solid proof, he might still not believe me. Worse, he might resent me forever. But doing nothing, letting him marry someone who saw him as a walking bank account, was something I simply couldn't live with. James always said I was overprotective, I muttered as Beatrix drove, speeding past the legal limit, that I needed to let Thomas learn from his own mistakes. There's mistakes, Beatrix said grimly, and then there's disasters. This is definitely the second kind. The estate came into view, its pristine grounds a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside me. Luxury cars packed the lot, and well-dressed guests were heading toward the garden where the ceremony was set. My heart sank when I noticed a security guard checking invitations at the main entrance. Beatrix parked at the far end of the lot. We paused for a second, brainstorming. What about the service entrance? I finally suggested, thinking back to my nursing days. There's always a back way for staff and deliveries. Beatrix nodded, impressed. Now that's the Ellie I remember from the ER. Let's go. We circled the building, trying to look like we belonged in our formal outfits. Sure enough, behind the main building, we found a plain door where the catering crew were going in and out with trays. Follow me, Beatrix whispered, fixing her dress and putting on the stern expression she'd mastered from years of running hospital departments. She approached a stressed-looking young man in catering clothes. Excuse me, we're looking for the groom's suite. Miss Bradford sent us. Urgent message for Mr. Sullivan. The man barely looked up, too focused on balancing champagne glasses. Second floor, east wing. But they're heading to the garden in 5 minutes. So hurry. We slipped inside, moving through the hustle of final wedding prep. We spotted the stairs and climbed quickly, my hands gripping the folder. Upstairs, it was quieter. The thick carpet muffled our footsteps as we searched. Then, we heard laughter behind a door marked Groom's Suite. I froze, doubt creeping in. What if he doesn't believe me? I whispered. What if this only drives him away? Beatrix squeezed my hand. That's a risk we have to take. Truth matters, especially when it hurts. I nodded, took a deep breath, and knocked. Andy opened the door. He looked sharp in his tux, but not as lively as he used to be when he came over for holidays. His eyes went wide when he saw me. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, pulling the door halfway shut. What are you doing here? Thomas said. Andy, please, I interrupted, my voice trembling. I need to speak to my son. Right now. It's urgent. He looked unsure, glancing behind him. This really isn't a good time. We're heading down soon, and Thomas is already stressed. It's about Vanessa, I said quickly. She's not who he thinks she is. I have proof. He needs to see it before it's too late. Something in Andy's face changed. A flicker of doubt, like this wasn't entirely new to him. Andy? Who's at the door? Came Thomas's voice from inside. Before Andy could respond, the door opened fully, and there stood my son, dressed in a tux, so much like his father that my heart ached. For a second, he just stared. Mom? He whispered, as if unsure I was real. Then his expression turned cold. What are you doing here? I told you you weren't welcome. His voice was sharp, and it hurt more than I expected. But I remembered what Rebecca had told me. I held on to my resolve. Thomas, please, just give me 5 minutes. There's something important you need to hear before the wedding. I don't want to hear anything, he snapped. You've chosen your house over my happiness, and now you're here to cause a scene on my wedding day? I'm not here to make a scene, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. I'm here because I love you. Too much to stay silent. Beatrix stepped forward. Thomas, your mother received disturbing information this morning about Vanessa. You need to hear it before it's too late. Thomas turned red with anger. So now you've brought someone to back you up. This is exactly why I didn't want you here. You've never given her a chance. You hate her because she sees through your manipulation. Thomas James Sullivan, I cut in, my voice turning firm, like only a mother's can. I have never lied to you, and I'm not about to start now. Please, 5 minutes? If you still want to go through with it afterward, I'll leave quietly. You'll never have to see me again. There was something in what I said, maybe the way I said it, that made him pause. Maybe it was the raw honesty in my final plea that made him hesitate. He looked at his watch, then over at Andy, who gave him a slight nod. 5 minutes, Thomas said coolly, motioning toward a small sitting area across the hallway, away from the groomsmen's suite. Once the door shut behind us, I got straight to the point. Vanessa has been engaged 3 times before, I started, opening the folder in my hands. Each time, she targeted men whose families had property but limited cash, manipulating the parents into selling assets or taking out loans to fund grand weddings. And each time, she ended things right before the wedding, after gaining access to their accounts. Thomas stared at me like I was speaking another language. That's insane. Ridiculous. I wish it were, I said gently, passing him the printouts Rebecca had sent. These are texts between Vanessa and her former roommate. This one talks about my cute little house, back when you were only 3 dates in. His hands trembled slightly as he looked through the pages, battling between disbelief and the reality staring back at him. These could be fake. Anyone can make screenshots, he mumbled. Then listen to this, Beatrix said, pulling out my phone and hitting play on the recording from Vanessa's drunken call. Her voice echoed in the room, mocking another, sentimental old bat she expected would die alone after she used their equity. She laughed as she talked about how easy Thomas was to control, how estranged he was from Mommy, and how she needed my house's money to fix financial problems he didn't even know about. The blood drained from Thomas's face as her voice detailed how she planned to tap into his accounts post-wedding. When the recording ended, silence fell like a heavy fog. He sank onto a small couch, hands still shaking, papers limp in his lap. There's more, I said softly. She was fired 3 months ago for falsifying client billing. She's over $200,000 in credit card debt. And those other weddings, there's documentation showing how each fiancé's parents sold property for her. Thomas stared blankly, confusion giving way to a rising, gut-wrenching horror. She said she got promoted, he whispered. She leaves for work every day. She even shows me emails. His voice trailed off as he read the forged employment details. She's been lying to you, sweetheart, I said, using the term of endearment I hadn't said in months. About her job, her past, her plans. He looked up at me, and in that moment, I saw my little boy again, wounded, unsure, longing for comfort. Why? He asked, his voice quiet and full of pain. Why me? I sat beside him, careful not to reach for him just yet. Rebecca says Vanessa targets men carefully, guys with good jobs, but without independent wealth, who are close to their parents, especially if the parent owns property. Men who want to prove something. Men with emotional gaps she can exploit. Beatrix added gently, she looks for vulnerabilities. Thomas winced, staring at his hands. After Dad died, I buried myself in work. I just wanted to make you both proud. Oh, Thomas, I whispered, my heart aching. Your father already was proud of you, and so am I. Not because of your career or success, but because of who you are. He looked around bitterly. And who is that? Someone who cut his own mother out of his life for a woman who saw him as a bank account. Someone so caught up in appearances that he ignored the truth. You're human, I said firmly. We all crave love. We all make mistakes. Vanessa used that against you. Just then, a sharp knock broke the moment. Andy poked his head in, his face tense. "Thomas, they're ready to start. If we don't begin now, we'll lose the time slot for the garden." Thomas looked at me, then down at the stack of evidence on his lap, torn between duty and truth. "What do I do?" he asked, sounding more like a boy than a grown man. "There are 200 people out there. Vanessa's family, my colleagues, everyone we know. You've got options," Beatrice said, calm and direct. "Call it off, delay it, go through with it, and deal with the fallout after. Whatever you choose, you're not stuck." He ran his hand through his styled hair, ruffling it in a way that reminded me of his father. "If I delay or go through with it, I'm just postponing what I already know, right?" "You are," I said quietly. "Once you know the truth, you can't pretend not to." Another knock, firmer this time. "Thomas!" Vanessa's father barked through the door. "She's ready." Thomas took a long breath, then stood tall, his shoulders squared in that same proud stance James used to have. "I need to see her," he said. "I need to look her in the eye and ask." "Are you sure that's wise?" Beatrix asked gently. "She might spin this or twist the moment." Thomas folded the documents, slipping them into his tuxedo pocket. "Maybe, but I need to do it my way." He turned to me then, his face a swirl of hurt, gratitude, and strength. "Thanks for showing up, for not walking away, even when I did." Before I could say a word, he opened the door and walked out, passing right by Vanessa's stunned father without saying a thing. Andy gave me a brief nod of encouragement before following after Thomas, leaving Beatrice and me alone in the sitting room. "Well," Beatrice said after a beat, "that didn't go quite how I thought it would." I nodded, heart still pounding. "No, but he listened. He believed us. That's more than I hoped for." Beatrice glanced at the clock. "So what now?" I checked my watch too. It was 10:58. "Now we wait," I said quietly, "and hope he has the strength to do what's right." We made our way downstairs, deliberately steering clear of where the guests had gathered. From a window, I saw the wedding garden already set. White chairs, lined in rows, extravagant floral arrangements, a flower-draped arch, and musicians ready. So much money, so much spectacle, all of it built on deception. Then raised voices drew our attention. Down a side corridor, Thomas and Vanessa stood in what looked like a small room with the door ajar. Vanessa stood in her expensive gown, flawless and gleaming. Thomas's back was to us, and though we couldn't hear, we could see the change in Vanessa's face. First confusion, then defensive anger, and then a chilling calm that sent a shiver through me. She reached for his arm, visibly trying to soften, her face morphing into something resembling sincere distress. I could almost read her lips, denials, excuses, possibly accusations. But Thomas gently removed her hand and pulled out the evidence from his jacket. One by one, he handed her the documents. We saw the moment it hit her, when she realized her plan had been exposed. Her mask dropped. The poised woman, who once sneered at my modest home, now looked wild with fury. She snatched and tore the papers in frustration. Her voice rose, loud enough for us to hear. "You pathetic little man. Do you know what you're throwing away? Who would want you without me?" Thomas stood firm, calm, despite the assault. He said something too low for us to catch, but whatever it was, it made Vanessa recoil. Then, in a shocking move, she grabbed a crystal vase and hurled it at the wall near his head. It shattered, drawing in staff members. Vanessa stormed out past them, shoving aside a coordinator, her gown trailing like a storm cloud behind her. Thomas remained, back turned, shoulders low, as if a heavy burden had been lifted, but left bruises behind. Andy joined him shortly, said something that made Thomas nod. "Should we go to him?" Beatrice asked, eyes wide. I shook my head. "Not yet. He needs a minute." Andy led Thomas through another door for some privacy, away from the gathering staff and guests. I caught a glimpse of Thomas's profile, pale, steady-jawed, a mirror of James when he had to face something painful. "What now?" Beatrice asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, I'll be here, if he'll have me." Just then, Vanessa's father appeared, face thunderous. His eyes landed on me, instantly narrowing. "You," he growled, storming toward us. "This is your fault. You poisoned him against her because you couldn't stand to see him happy. Jealous of her youth, her success, her role in his life." I stood tall, holding his gaze. "Mr. Bradford, I understand you're upset, but maybe speak to your daughter before accusing me." "My daughter is in tears. Your son called off the wedding minutes before the ceremony," he snapped, red-faced. "Do you realize the embarrassment? The cost? 200 guests." I kept calm. "I'm sorry for the disruption, but your daughter has a history of targeting men, draining their family's finances, and walking away before the weddings. That stopped him." His expression flickered. Recognition, maybe worry, before turning back to indignation. "That's slander. I could sue you." Beatrice stepped in smoothly. "You could, but then the recordings, texts, and financial records would all become public. Is that something you really want?" The threat hung heavy in the silence. Mr. Bradford adjusted his tie, more to stall than to fix it. "I don't know what game you're playing," he muttered, trying for civility. "But this isn't over. Thomas and Vanessa just had a misunderstanding. All couples fight before the ceremony. It's nerves." His effort to brush off what had happened would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. I wondered how many times he'd made excuses for her before. "Mr. Bradford," I said gently, "this is more than pre-wedding nerves. Your daughter needs help, and my son deserves honesty." Andy returned then, scanning for me. He rushed over, ignoring Mr. Bradford. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, a little breathless, "Thomas is asking for you. He's in the library." He glanced at the chaos around us. "It's been quite the morning." I squeezed his arm. "Thank you, Andy, for everything." As Beatrice and I followed him toward the East Wing Library, I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. The wedding that had consumed us all was over. But at what emotional cost to Thomas? Still, through the pain, there was hope. He had asked for me. After everything, a fragile new start. Outside the library door, I paused, bracing myself for what lay ahead. Guests still needed explanations. Vanessa's family might confront us again, and Thomas would need time to heal and trust again. "You ready?" Beatrice asked softly. I adjusted the necklace she had lent me that morning, when we'd planned to simply watch the wedding from afar. "Ready," I said, and opened the door. Inside, the library was serene, lined with old books and soft light streaming in. Thomas stood near a window, jacket off, bow tie removed. He looked more like himself than he had in ages. When he turned to the sound of the door, I saw the tears still on his face. Without thinking, I opened my arms, and he crossed the room in 3 strides, wrapping me in an embrace. For a long moment, we simply held each other, the first time since the fight that had torn us apart 6 months ago. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, voice thick. "What I said. It was awful. I was awful." I stroked his hair like I had when he was small and scared. "There's nothing you could ever say that I wouldn't forgive." He pulled back, wiping his face with the heel of his hand, in a gesture so childlike It broke my heart. How did you know about Vanessa? I explained about Rebecca's call, watching his face move through disbelief, anger, and sorrow as he absorbed the details of Vanessa's schemes. There are 200 people out there, he said finally, shaking his head, all expecting a wedding. They'll understand, Beatrice offered gently from a nearby chair. Better a messy explanation than a lifetime of regret. Thomas gave a faint smile. You've always been the voice of reason. Someone has to be, she replied fondly, especially with your mother and her flair for drama. Andy knocked again, this time entering with a tray and silver coffee set. Figured we needed this more than champagne, he said, setting it down. Just then, a commotion outside caught our ears. Shouting, quick footsteps, and walkie-talkie chatter. The wedding coordinator appeared at the door. Her usual calm was visibly shaken. Mr. Sullivan, she began slowly, I don't want to intrude, but things are getting a bit hard to manage. Miss Bradford has, well, she's dramatically left in the bridal car. Her parents are telling the guests there's been a delay because of a medical emergency involving you. She paused gently. Is that the version you'd prefer us to go with? Thomas just stared at her, confused. Andy stepped in. Mr. Bradford is saying you had a panic attack. They're telling people you've been sedated and the wedding will be rescheduled. His tone was a mix of worry and disbelief. That's ridiculous, Thomas said firmly, sitting straighter. I'm clearly not sedated or having a breakdown. It's just a story, I offered quietly, meant to save face. For them and for you. He thought for a second and shook his head. No, I won't start my new life with a lie, no matter how easy it would be. He turned to the coordinator. Please tell the guests I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. But the wedding is canceled, not postponed. They're welcome to enjoy the meal. It's already paid for. I'll make a short announcement in 15 minutes. The coordinator nodded, relieved to have a clear decision. Very well, sir. I'll take care of it. After she left, Thomas slumped into a chair, gripping his coffee like it was holding him up. I don't even know what to say to everyone. The truth, I said. Not every painful detail, but enough to make it clear. Your relationship can't continue. He nodded slowly. And after that? What then? I can't go back to my apartment. Vanessa has a key, and half her stuff is still there. You'll come home with me, I told him, without a second thought. For as long as you need. Home, he repeated, as if tasting the word. I wasn't sure I still had one. You'll always have a home with me, Thomas. Always. We spent the next 15 minutes getting things ready. Thomas jotted down a short speech on library paper, while I helped fix his collar and smooth his hair, just like I had before every school picture and big interview. Andy went to explain things to the other groomsmen. Beatrice stepped outside to call a locksmith friend to help change the locks at Thomas's apartment. A smart move after Vanessa's emotional exit. When it was time, Thomas stood tall and led us to the main hall. The room buzzing with guests dressed for celebration. Their whispers stopped as he entered. He walked to the center, his face tight with stress, but his stance proud. Beatrice and I stayed at the back, my heart full of pride. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, Thomas began, his voice calm and clear. Thank you for coming, and I'm very sorry for what's happened. There won't be a wedding today. After learning something important this morning, I've made the painful decision to end my relationship with Vanessa. A quiet stir swept through the room. He raised his hand to settle the crowd. I won't share the private details, out of respect for both of us. But I've realized there are deep differences and broken trust between us that make marriage impossible. The meal will still be served for anyone who wishes to stay. Please accept it as thanks for your understanding. For those who choose to leave, I truly understand. And again, I apologize. He stepped back, remarkably composed. I could still see how hard it was for him. A few moments later, applause broke out. Andy and the groomsmen started it. Some guests came up to shake his hand. Others quietly left. Vanessa's parents were gone, likely left when she did. Almost 2 hours later, we finally left Oak Ridge. Thomas had thanked every staff member and vendor before going. He spoke kindly to each guest and stayed graceful under their curiosity. In the car, exhaustion was all over him. He leaned his head against the window and didn't argue. "You doing okay?" I asked softly, touching his hand. He nodded without opening his eyes. "Just tired," and he hesitated. "Ashamed. I was totally fooled. Vanessa was skilled at manipulating," I reminded him. "She saw your kindness, your loyalty, your heart, and used it." "I didn't treat you kindly," he said, looking at me. "I chose her over you. I threatened to cut you out if you didn't sell your house. What kind of son does that?" "Someone under the influence of someone toxic," Beatrice chimed in. "I've seen it with my patients. These kinds of people isolate you, make it us versus them, and cloud your judgment. It's not your fault." "It still feels like it is," Thomas whispered. "I should have noticed how she tried to turn me against you." "Hindsight is clear," I said. "We don't get that clarity in the moment. What matters now is where we go from here." The rest of the ride was quiet. As we turned into our old neighborhood, I felt Thomas ease a little beside me. When we pulled up to my house, he straightened and looked around, like seeing it for the first time. Mrs. Peterson was outside and waved, then blinked in surprise, seeing Thomas in his dress shirt. "Isn't today?" she started. "Long story, Helen," Beatrice called cheerfully. "Thomas will be staying here a while. Maybe you could bring some of that famous banana bread tomorrow." Mrs. Peterson caught on quickly. "Of course. Welcome home, Thomas. We've missed you." Inside, he paused at the door, taking it all in: the marks on the kitchen door frame, family pictures, the wobbly bookshelf he and his dad made. "It's all still here," he said softly, "even after the way I treated you." "Why would I change anything?" I replied. "This is still your home, always has been." He headed upstairs to wash away the day. Beatrice and I made dinner, his childhood favorite, chicken and dumplings. "You're something else, Eleanor," Beatrice said while chopping. "After all he said, all he did, you still welcome him like nothing happened." "That's what moms do," I said, though her kind words touched me. "Love doesn't keep score." "Still," she pressed, "most would want an apology." I rolled dough with a shrug. "He's hurting enough. He did apologize. The rest will come in time." That night, after dinner and Beatrice left, Thomas and I sat on the porch swing. The garden was peaceful, glowing in the evening light. We rocked in silence for a long while, letting the calm soak in. "I talked to Rebecca," Thomas said at last, while I was setting the table. "She called to check on me. That was kind of her." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "Vanessa has done this before. Not just the fake engagements and financial scams, but the cruel character attacks after things fall apart. Her past fiancés had faced rumors, cheating, mental issues, even criminal behavior. Are you worried she'll try that with you?" I asked gently. "Let her," he said, with surprising strength. "I've got the evidence Rebecca gave me, along with proof of her financial lies. I won't go quiet like her past victims." I watched my son in the fading light and saw something different in him, a strength and self-worth that Vanessa may have accidentally helped him discover. "Your father would be proud of you," I told him. You stood up in front of everyone and owned the truth when you could have hidden behind a lie. He stayed silent for a while. Then he said, voice thick with emotion, I found Dad's journal in my jacket pocket when I changed. I don't even remember putting it there. I smiled. I might have slipped it in this morning. Thought you could use his wisdom today. I did, he said. I read his final entry. He was worried my ambition would blind me to what really matters. But I think I finally get it now. And what's that? I asked, holding his hand. That a life based on appearances means nothing. Real wealth isn't about fancy houses or big titles. It's about having people who care, having somewhere and someone to come home to when everything falls apart. Tears welled in my eyes as I leaned on his shoulder and we rocked in the quiet. The future was still uncertain. Thomas had to rebuild his home, his career, maybe even face public judgment. But in that moment, we had found something deeply valuable, a chance to reconnect. That phone call earlier had done more than stop a bad marriage. It had restored a broken bond between mother and son. As stars began to appear in the night sky, I made a silent vow to remind Thomas of the inheritance that truly mattered, not a house or money, but the unconditional love he had from us. No one could take that from him. But the peace didn't last long. The very next morning, while drawn downstairs by the smell of pancakes, Thomas got a call from his law firm. He looked worried as he answered. I gave him space, though I stayed nearby in case he needed me. The conversation was one-sided and tense. Yes, I understand. No, that's not fair. Can I come in and talk about this? He said. After he hung up, he stood frozen. That was Gerald Hoffman, the senior partner, he said numbly. Vanessa's dad called him. Turns out the Bradfords are one of the firm's biggest clients. Something she never told me. My heart sank. What did they say? I asked. They want me to take a leave of absence while this unfortunate personal situation settles. Basically, I'm being benched until the Bradfords decide if they'll keep doing business with us. I handed him a cup of coffee. That's so unfair. He sighed. They're not firing me, yet, but they're moving my clients to other lawyers. Because you refuse to marry a liar? I said, shocked. Office politics don't care about fairness, Mom, he replied, especially when millions are involved. Seeing his shoulders droop, I couldn't hold back. You need legal advice. This feels like retaliation. He nodded. Gerald's agreed to meet with me tomorrow. Maybe I can salvage something. That afternoon, Thomas went with Andy and a locksmith to his apartment to secure the place and grab essentials. While he was gone, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Rebecca Martin, a woman in her 30s with auburn hair, pulled back in a nervous but determined look. Mrs. Sullivan, she said, offering her hand. I hope it's okay. I wanted to check on Thomas and apologize. I invited her in. In person, she seemed sincere, but weighed down by regret. We sat with tea, and she confessed, I should have come forward earlier. If I had, Thomas might have avoided that humiliation. You spoke when it mattered, I assured her. That took bravery. She shook her head. Not bravery. Guilt. I made excuses for Vanessa for too long. She had leverage over me, both professionally and personally. As she explained more, it became clear Vanessa was even more manipulative than we thought. She kept files on people, used others as pawns, and enjoyed ruining families. How did you break away? I asked. Rebecca's face darkened. Her ex-fiancé, Daniel. After she ruined him, he tried to take his own life. I found him. That broke something in me. I couldn't be part of her games anymore. Her story was horrifying. Thomas had barely escaped financial and emotional destruction. Have you contacted the other victims? I asked. She nodded. Michael's doing okay. His family had to sell their cabin to pay off the debt. Daniel's still struggling. He moved back in with his mom, barely leaves home. Before we could say more, Thomas returned. His face froze when he saw Rebecca. What are you doing here? He asked. I came to warn you, she said. Vanessa won't let this go easily. Thomas sighed. She already hasn't. I'm suspended because of her father. That's just the start, Rebecca said. Check your phone. Thomas pulled out his phone. As he scrolled, his face turned pale. She's posting everywhere, claiming I had a breakdown at the wedding, that she's supporting me through it. He kept reading. She's implying I was hiding a drug problem. That's how she operates, Rebecca said. She plays the caring fiancé while destroying your image. She's even emailed my co-workers and clients, Thomas said, shaking with anger, making me look unstable. She's undermining you before you can speak out, Rebecca explained. So when you tell the truth, no one believes you. Thomas collapsed onto the couch, stunned. If I defend myself, I look crazy. If I say nothing, she wins. You fight with facts, Rebecca said. Documents, witnesses. People like me, Michael and Daniel. They're ready to speak. That gave Thomas strength. Then we fight back, with truth. He looked at Rebecca. You said they'd come forward? They're waiting, she said. They just need someone to lead. Then we go public, Thomas said. Not just my story, ours. That night, our home turned into a war room. Andy brought his laptop. Beatrice arrived with food. Emma, an urban planner and Thomas's friend, joined too. Rebecca set up video calls with Michael and Daniel. They all shared how Vanessa hurt them. I watched, filled with pride and sorrow. When we wrapped up around midnight, the table was filled with notes and plans. Thomas had drafted a public statement. He scheduled a meeting with his firm. Everyone was ready. It'll get worse before it gets better, Rebecca warned. She'll escalate. Thomas nodded. Let her. I'm done letting fear silence me. After everyone left, Thomas helped clean up. Sorry for dragging all this into your life, he said. I looked at him. Remember what your dad used to say about storms? He smiled faintly. That it's not about avoiding them, but finding a safe harbor? Exactly, I said, squeezing his hand. This is your harbor. Later, as I got ready for bed, I overheard Thomas on the phone. I won't lie to protect Vanessa's reputation, he told Gerald. I have proof. I'll see you at 9. I silently thanked Rebecca. Without her, Thomas might have married someone who saw him as just another mark. Vanessa's smear campaign was in full swing, but my son was finally standing tall, grounded in truth. 6 months later, autumn colored our garden gold as Thomas and I sipped coffee on the porch. Sometimes it feels like a dream, he said. A lot had changed. After losing his job, he shifted into affordable housing design. Less money, more meaning. Rebecca now led support groups for fraud victims. Vanessa left town after her father's firm was investigated. Mom, we got it. Thomas ran inside one afternoon, waving approval for his housing project. Fully funded, ready to go. That weekend, we had a backyard party with everyone who helped him rebuild. Rebecca, Michael, Daniel, Andy, Beatrice, and Emma, whose friendship with Thomas was slowly turning into something more. As golden light bathed our backyard, Thomas raised a toast to unexpected journeys. We'd love to hear from you. What did you think of today's story? Leave a comment below. Your thoughts, reflections, or even your own experiences. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this touched your heart. Your feedback helps us create stories that truly resonate. See you in the next one.